Hello, welcome to Podsongs. I'm Jack Stafford. I interview inspiring people who are in service to others as inspiration for new songs. Today we're chatting with author, consultant and founder of Interview Valet, which is a podcast interview marketing agency. I used them to get on podcasts to promote my last album, Deeper, which I released last year. And he got me first excited about podcasting. So we're going to chat about what makes a good podcast and much more. Let me introduce you to Mr. Tom Schwab. So when I was thinking of interviewing you for this, the person that sprang to mind, have you seen The Godfather?
I have.
Well, in it, there's an actor called Lee Strasberg. And he was a Polish-born American actor-director, but he's famous for he's teaching the actors. He taught the method, Marlon Brando, yeah. And so he was asked to finally appear in a movie, and he was asked to appear in The Godfather, and he felt such pressure because everyone was going to look at him because he's teaching all these famous actors. So if he's not an amazing actor, people are going to talk. So this is now if you don't give an amazing interview as being the podcaster, you've got a lot of pressure.
I do, and I didn't know that story, but I'm just thinking, well, I got Marlon Brando here, right? You can carry the entire podcast episode, and everybody will remember that.
Well, come back with a compliment. I'm going to make notes throughout this interview on how to be a great guest. So hit them with a compliment early on. Okay, I'm liking that. So let's just start with a bit about how did podcasts begin? I mean, for people who I don't even know how. Something about Apple, isn't it? How did it all begin?
It really started as almost like a audio blog, and people would just start to record those. And about 2004 is when they actually used the word podcast. And back then, it's funny because I've asked my youngest daughters, what does the pod stand for in podcast? And they're like, I don't know, Dad, what's it stand for? Because to them, they don't know a world with the iPod. But that's how it used to be. You'd have to plug your iPod into the computer. You'd have to figure out how to download the audio file and then upload the audio file onto your MP3 player or your iPod.
Jeez, back in the Stone Age.
Yeah, you want to talk about a committed subscriber there? It was only the techie and nerdy people that could actually do that. And so it went on that way for a while. And then once it got easier, once we got wireless, once we got smartphones, all of a sudden it became more like on-demand radio. And so what's interesting about it is podcast has really been going since about 2004, but most people have only found out about it over the last few years. I can remember we started our company in 2015, and people would ask me what I did, and I'd give them the little 1 or 2 minute elevator speech. They shake their head and then go, what's a podcast? Really, I just look at it as, it's on-demand audio. It's one of the few forms where you can multitask while you're doing it. You can listen when you want, where you want, even at the speed you want.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, I've just actually got into them, but is the curve of usership, is it exponential? Is it still doubling every year, the number of listeners or something?
It is, but in some ways, I'm almost glad that it has grown as slowly as it has. Right. So if you figure 2004 is when they really started, we're 16 years into it. Now, most things peak in 16 months and then die.
That's true. Yeah.
Whereas this has really taken a while. It's grown. The support structure for it, the art, the craft has grown with that. And in some ways, I think there's a lot of parallels to radio. And there was a conference I went to a couple of years ago at Harvard University, and somebody gave, it was Liz Covert, gave a keynote on the parallels between radio and podcasting. And, Marconi, Tesla, whoever you want to give credit for inventing
Did he have
radio.
a podcast?
Did not, but you think about it, they invented that in the late 1800s, right? And in 1920, radio was called wireless internet. And by 1930, it was radio. And so really they were, 20 years into it before it started to take off. And I think we're going to see something similar in podcasting. I really think we're at the beginning of the golden age of podcasting. And I think this next decade is going to be really exciting on what this medium turns into.
Because Apple still have the kind of monopoly on it when you will go download from, but Spotify just signed Joe Rogan for, is it 100 million?
Yeah, 100 million. And there's, it used to be that the vast majority were downloaded on Apple. And now, there's so many different players, and, there's Spotify, Overcast, Himalaya. There's all these different players. So it's very, very fragmented. And in some ways, that's a blessing, right? Because we don't have one big person controlling everything. The other side is sort of a curse too, because you don't have all the analytics for it. We don't have all the eyeballs on one station. Video used to be really, really fragmented probably 10 years ago, and then everything went to YouTube. So right now it's still very fragmented, and Apple doesn't have the majority listenership there. It's fragmented. They're still the biggest, but they're losing market share all the time. And I think that's great, right? From the standpoint is, I don't care where people hear the content. I think it should be wherever and however they want to.
So you're in the center of the storm here. So what's happening now? Is it Spotify going to take over? What's podcasting going to look like in 1, 2, 3, 5 years?
That's going to be interesting. And I hope that it doesn't go the same way as radio and video.
In what way?
Because radio, when radio started out, you didn't need a license to do it. Anybody could have a radio station. And then they came in and started to put laws involved in it and control it. And all of a sudden, boom, you get, 3 big radio networks. And if you didn't go through them, your content wasn't heard. The same thing with YouTube, where all of a sudden you can put something up on YouTube, but if they don't like it from their terms of service, they can either ban it or they can hide it through their algorithm. And I think podcasting has so much promise to it because it's not commercialized yet. It's not regulated yet. It's not that you have to go through, 3 or 4 gatekeepers to get there. So I'm really hoping and hopeful that podcasting will stay very fragmented. There'll always be a place for, BBC now is coming in with podcasting. That will always be a place there. But I hope there's always a place for the independents, because that voice is so important. That was one of the promises of radio, was that it could break down ignorance, right? How can you, if you've got access to all this information, how can you still be ignorant? It could break down sexism and nationalism, racism, whatever you want to do, because it's really easy to hate an idea, but when you actually hear the person and realize that, oh, wow, they're a lot like me, right? We've got more in common than we have different. And that's, to me, the promise of podcasting. And that's one of the reasons that I love podcasting, because it can expose you to so many different ideas. But also it's some of the reasons that I fear podcasting, because you can also selectively choose who you listen to and think, ooh, everybody, the entire world thinks like me. So I always challenge people, if you're on one side of an issue, listen to a podcast on the other side of the issue. Not that they're going to change your mind, but at least figure out how they think. And you'll realize chances are they're not this devil with a couple of horns. They're just somebody that has a different viewpoint on how we both want to get to the same end.
That's interesting, isn't it? There's like this rush to extremes, because I was looking at the podcast ranking, and, and if you look at spiritual, the top in the top 10, there's atheist podcasts, and super religious podcasts, and you have to go to the extremes to get listeners, so.
Well, or if you want to be on the list,
Yeah.
right? And one of the things I always say is bigger is not better. Better is better, right? Just because you've got a big podcast doesn't mean it's a great podcast. Doesn't mean that the people are engaged with it, right? And I think in this age of numbers today and analytics, we forget that we're talking to people. So many people will go, well, this podcast only has 5,000 listeners. And I'll point out to them, have you ever talked to a room of 5,000 people?
It's a chunk of people.
Yeah, it's like, no. I'm like, what's the biggest audience you've ever spoken to live? For most people, it's maybe 100. Very few people have ever talked to 1,000 people live. But you go on a podcast, you're not only talking to hundreds and thousands of people, you're talking throughout time, right? So we're recording this in 2020. There's going to be somebody in 2030 that listens to this and laughs every time we say podcast because it sounds like calling radio wireless telegraph.
Gosh, yeah. So that's so funny because I upload to Anchor FM. So I upload and it's syndicated out to all these thousands of different, how do some people use these small services then where it goes to, or is everyone going through Spotify or?
No, really. There's so many different ways to do that, right? There's probably at least a couple dozen where you can upload it to, and then they push it out to everything. And what I love about that is when you said Anchor FM, I knew what you were talking about. You knew what it was, but 99% of the listeners have no idea. They don't. They don't care what the distribution is. Yeah. It's to them, it's not important. It's the content, and so how it gets there isn't important. It's just that it's there, and I love that there's so many different ways to do it. If all of a sudden something happens to Anchor FM, that's okay. You can push it through some other distribution network. There's been a couple that came out and said, no, we're going to filter this, or we've got this new terms of service policy you can't do this, whatever. You can't swear or something like that, for an example. Okay, that's fine. It's their company. They can do it that way, but there's options then. It's like, okay, well, then I'll just go over to this other one. There's been a couple that have, start to share data, and other ones say, no, we never will do that. So if that's important to you, you can change to different ones. For me, even on the player that you listen to, for me, I just always struggled with the iTunes player. And then I think it was Overcast that I found. And that one really, really works for me. One of the things I like about it is it takes away the pauses. So I've got ADD, ADHD, whatever you want to call it, probably was never diagnosed, but my mind wanders really quick. So I tend to listen to podcasts at 2 times speed. And if somebody can take away that dead space there, that helps me because now my mind doesn't wander. And so there's something for everybody there.
Yeah. Can it take away the adverts?
And there'll be other ones there too. And, some podcasts have ads on them. That's fine. Yeah. Other ones don't. It's really whatever your preference is.
I kind of like it. They don't put how many lists, because you look on YouTube and you immediately judge something, in a base level to see if it's successful. Is this worth watching? How many people? But it could still be a good video. But with the good thing about the podcast is they don't show how many listeners and downloads. There's not this statistic battle.
I never realized that and connected that, but I agree with you. It's not a popularity of what does everybody think, but what do I think? It's more of a personal interaction, just listening to it in your ears. And I think the other thing, what's famous today, the people that my kids know, I could walk by them in the street and would have no idea who these people are. But, the people that I follow that, would be on my wish list to have dinner with, they would look at them and say, who's that? So I love that,
Yeah.
you know, we don't have a handful of stars anymore. Everybody has their own tribe.
So how do people hear about new podcasts? 'Cause it's quite a commitment. You only have certainly how many hours to listen. So how do people find out about new podcasts?
Discovery is still one of the big problems, and that can be a problem because there's so many different players. There is 1.1 million podcasts right now as we speak here toward the end of 2020. So there are some where it will be they're advertising, so they'll advertise their podcast on other ones. Other ones could be where the guest or the host will be a guest on other podcasts, you know, podcasts, no podcasters. Right. So they'll go there to introduce themselves and their show. You almost think about it on, you know, late night television. The hosts are on each other's show, or you got a new movie coming out, so let's go talk about it. But it's funny, there's been a couple surveys done by podcasters and to try to figure out where their money was best spent. You know, should I advertise this on Facebook or other things? And our answer is most people find out about podcasts from other people. Mm-hmm. Right. So if I'm a pickleball aficionado, and I did not even know what this sport was a couple of years ago, somebody talked about it and I said, what is that? And they explained it to me. I'm like, okay, I guess so. And to me, it made as much sense as cricket. But if you're a pickleball aficionado,
you've got to tell us what pickleball is now.
Oh, pickleball, and now everybody's gonna like look it up. It's almost like, imagine table tennis and regular tennis played together. So like these little wooden mallets. It's a little bit slower, or wooden rackets, and it's played on a tennis court or a small tennis court with like a wiffle ball and almost looks like tennis or table tennis, ping pong paddles. Okay, sounds you know, and to this, you know, 90% of the world, 99% of the world is going to go, what is that? That makes no sense. I have no idea about it. But if you're a pickleball aficionado, you're going to say, I just found this great podcast that talks all about pickleball.
What are you going to talk about it? How are you going to talk for an hour about?
I don't know, right? But you know, people are like other people, right? So if there was if you play pickleball, chances are your friends do too. That's where you get together before you go. I'm
Googling it now, yeah.
Before you have a pint or something like that. And so one of them finds it, they all find it there. So it's interesting. It's still a very personal thing, not a mass market thing.
Okay. So you're saying you can podcast about anything, and as long as there's enough niche people in the world to listen to it, you're going to be a success.
Yes. And you look at it and say, what is a success? You know, is a success having 1,000 fans, or is it having 1 million, right? Maybe if you're too niche, you won't have 1 million, but you know, the top 1% of all podcasts right now get 47,000 downloads per episode. So we're not talking mass markets.
47,000. Yeah, that's still because those people are really motivated, you know, and you have their attention. It's not like just in another medium where, you know, you're watching TV and an advert comes on. These people are really listening and tuning in, you know. And I mean, when I've been listening, listening to, if you're interested in health and fitness, you focused on those people who, how can I be fitter? How can I be healthier? So,
and the data shows that of the people that listen, it's over 70% listen to the very end. So you think about it, they're listening without distraction. So you put this out and say you only get 1,000 downloads. Well, if you went to talk every week at the local theater, you would be thrilled if there was 1,000 people that showed up, and you know, over 70% of them waited on every word to and you know, didn't leave early. That would be a huge success.
Members of my family don't pay that much attention to me.
I was going to say, I wouldn't show up for myself every week to listen to myself. So So with that, I think it's really what success is. If it's just, I want to be bigger than BBC, it's going to be tough. But if you're like, I've got ideas that I want to share, I've got a tribe that I want to serve, I want to connect with people, man, I love podcasting.
So, so besides the subject and the niche and what makes a great podcast in your experience, having been on thousands and listened to tens of thousands?
I think we're seeing an evolution to it also. It's getting better. When podcasting first started out, really all you needed to do it was a computer and maybe GarageBand. But it sounded like that too. There was an old movie called Wayne's World. And the joke was two guys in their mom's basement. Well, that's what most podcasts sounded like. Just two guys in their mom's basement. And as the time has gone on, the equipment's got better. The content has got better. New players have come into the field. And with that, the entire industry, the bar has raised on it. So early on, it was, maybe two people just talking about nothing. And then it went to, let's ask everybody the same 5 questions. And now it's gotten into, I think, really deep and meaningful conversations. And to me, that's the best part about podcasting is I look at it as it's not so much an interview, but a conversation. And if you think if we were sitting down having breakfast, this would be the same type of conversation we would have. And I don't know if it's that voyeur aspect in us, but if you're sitting down having breakfast and there's somebody in the booth next to you that's having a really interesting conversation, well, maybe you listen in. It'd be rude to get in on the conversation. It'd be rude to look at them, but you're just riveted by it. And to me, that's what podcasting is. And what's interesting is the conversation isn't just between the host and the guest. And I used to think that. And then one of our clients, who was a futurist, Bix Bixon, pointed out to me, he's like, no, you think about it. The best podcasts cause a conversation between the listener and the host and the guest, right? Where they start to think and go, no, I don't believe that. Well, I never thought about it that way. They're starting to think about it. And he said, when a podcast truly goes viral is when somebody listens to the podcast and then goes on with their day and in conversation says, I was listening to this podcast by Jack Stafford, and this is what they were talking about on this. And they take those ideas from the host and the guest. They take it out of their ears, and then they start to put it into their daily conversations. To me, that spread of ideas, that's what podcasting should be. And I think we also have to remember that this is an evergreen medium. So there's some podcasts that are focused on, today's news or today's sports. But I think the big ideas are the ones that are going to stand the test of time. So I'm not talking about, the 6 tricks to get more Pinterest followers, right? I can Google that. I can find that answer. But the big ideas, that big questions, the big discussions that people are having, those are the things that to me are very interesting on podcasts.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've listening to so many, also because I was interviewing, because I've had quite a few guests now. I've been getting up to speed since I last spoke to you. And you have some very interesting guests. One was a psychologist, Stephen C. Hayes, and he was about how all your thoughts are very repetitive and very unoriginal. And I've been noticing that as I walk around, that it's true. I can go for a walk and not have an original thought or have an original. I'm just repeating. If I go for walk in the garden after talking to you, this conversation will still be going around in my head, and it's just so boring up there. And so having a podcast takes away that, because you can replace your voice in your head with someone else who is going to give you an original idea or thought, because they're talking about something else. So you think that's a good thing or a bad thing? I mean,
I think that's a wonderful thing. And I call it cross-pollination, right? In nature, you don't get fruit unless you cross-pollinate, right? And I think in life, it's the same way, that you don't get fruit out of your life unless you intentionally cross-pollinate. And that could be different ideas. It could be different exposure to things. That's why I think travel is important, right? To realize that not everything is just like around, my town, or the cross-pollination of ideas. And I live in Southwestern Michigan. I love it. It's agricultural, great people here, but it's not a great diversity of ideas. And so if the only ideas that I get are from right around here, everybody has that same sort of idea and loop going on through their mind. If nobody ever reads a book, if nobody ever listens to a podcast, if we all just listen to the same 3 TV stations, we're all going to have that same loop there. So it's not till that person that goes and travels and comes back with a new idea, a new recipe. It's like, wow, that's really great. Yeah. Or somebody reads a new book and has a new idea, or listens to a podcast. So, I look at it as cross-pollination bearing fruit. But as you were talking about that, maybe that's why I like to run with listening to books or listening to podcasts. Right? Because if not, I would just run and the same loop would keep going over and over. And at least with this, it challenges me to think of different things.
Well, it's good you get this. This is a nice idea. This pollination. This is a nice way to phrase it. I think it's I'm kind of torn, because I think you got to be somewhere in the middle, because you should be able to have the voice sometimes and be able to be still and quiet. Otherwise, you wake up in the middle of the night and you have to turn a podcast on because you've just got this brain that's out of control. I mean, someone like my girlfriend, she doesn't listen to any podcasts or read very much. And I tell her, you've got to listen to podcasts. You've got to just get some new pollen in there, like you would say. But then I have another friend who listens to podcasts all the time. And I would say to him, just limit it, because you just become, I don't think you develop a good mind that way,
Oh, yeah, and there's a healthy balance to everything. Isolation is not healthy, but neither is being so busy and so saturated that you don't have time to think. It's almost like both ends are avoidance, and there's got to be a healthy middle there.
Yeah. No, it's very true. Yeah, because the thing is, I write songs about people, so I can't, because a lot of podcasts are, there's the health podcast, so you have, the health things, or it's the entrepreneurial, and you have the same kind of guests. But once I've written the song about someone, if I have someone about nose breathing, I can't have another guest about breathing, because I can't write another song about it. So I'm forced to be interesting, have many different guests. So I don't know which category should I put my podcast in, in that way. Is it entertainment or it's education? Or?
It's some of the podcasts out there are in different categories. And, iTunes only has a limited number of categories, and they actually just cut it down by about a third, probably within the last 2 years. And so it's like there's not a category for everything. And I know some podcasters that will go from business to education, and they'll move it around there.
Oh, you can change once you're up, can you?
You can change once you're up, or at least you used to be able to, I know. And they would get on different lists, and they would rank higher, and they would tap into different audiences there. So it's like,
that's a good strategy.
What is this? I don't know. It's interesting. It's different. And I like it from the standpoint of it exposes you to different ideas. It's like not every guest is the same, although all your previous guests make me nervous, right? So it's like, ooh, the psychologist you talk to, now you're analyzing me on this and going, oh, that's why Tom does this. Or you said the nose breather. I'm like, I hope I haven't been mouth breathing into the microphone.
When you're running, I bet, do you run? Do you nose breathe when you're running?
I'm old enough now that I just pant like a dog when I run. I joke that I listen at 2x as I run at half x. And I think that it could be a honor violation when I say run. Some people would go, the guy's out sightseeing, but hey, I enjoy it.
Can you keep track when you listen at twice the speed? I mean, does that?
It is an acquired thing. So if my bride's in the car with me, I've got to turn it down because it drives her crazy.
Yeah.
For
Do they have
me,
a higher voice? Do they have a higher voice when they're doing it twice the speed?
they do. And the weird part is I know so many podcasters that I'm used to listening to them. So after I listen to your podcast for a while and then we talk on Zoom or meet in real life, it'd be like, Jack, would you just speed up and get to the point? You know, it just feels like everybody's in slow motion. But there was a book on by a gentleman that actually went blind while he was in college. He was an actor. Then he actually clerked for Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. And he talked in there that he listened at 7x to audio.
Is that possible?
He said it was possible because he was so used to it. And he said it also keeps people out of your office because they hear this high pitch and it's just like annoying to them, like fingernails on a chalkboard. And this guy would just, and granted, he's incredibly bright, but he was able to listen at 7x. And I'm like, wow, I can't imagine listening to a book and being able to consume that. And it's almost like speed reading, right?
Yeah. Speed reading, I guess. Gosh, I mean, I guess if you're lying down or and you're in the dark, you can do But most of us, when I listen to a podcast, I'm doing something else. So I think that's just too much bandwidth for me. I couldn't.
Well, I guess he was blessed to be blind, right? Because he's always in the dark. So we struggle at 2x, and he's like, "Oh, I can do this at 7x."
Gosh, okay. Well, I'm not quite at that level now. So you have, this is ADD has helped you with develop your business because you've built quite a podcast empire now with this Interview Valet. Maybe you could just tell us a bit about, because I've used your service. Maybe that's how I should tell people how I know you, is that I've because I released, because when we had a COVID and we were all in quarantine and I was launching a new album, and so I was thinking, how can I get people to listen to, because it's, if there's 1.1 million podcasts, there's many, many more musicians than that if you go on Spotify Music, and it's hard to get people to listen to you. And so if I go on podcasts, I can get half an hour of people really tell the story behind the songs. People get much more into it. So I came across your company, and you helped me get interviews on other podcasts. So it was a great experience, and eventually led me to start my own podcast. So I really thank you for that.
Well, thank you. And we love working with you. And, our mission at Interview Valet is to personally introduce inspiring thought leaders to millions of ideal people they could serve for the betterment of all. And people would say, well, where's podcast interviews in there? And I'm like, well, it's not about the interview. It's not about booking someone. It's really about making that connection, introducing people. And to me, I think there's a lot of great marketing slogans out there. I just don't agree with them. Like, you're one funnel away, or that you've got to break through the noise. I laugh when I hear that. I think mostly it's the people that are selling us the megaphones that are telling us to break through the noise. None of us are getting heard. It's like yelling at a sporting event. Nobody's hearing you. You're just adding to the noise. And to me, I believe the best way to really get heard is to get introduced by somebody that's already respected, in this case, the podcast host, and then get in on the conversation that's already going on to add value. And that's really what we do. So we've got a team of 18. We're a distributed workforce. Not everybody wants to live in Kalamazoo, Michigan with me. So we've got, but work is what you do, not where you go. And so for us, we've got 2 people in Europe, we've got 2 in Canada, and the rest in the United States. We serve about 100 clients at a time, a lot of authors, speakers, brands, consultants, and really to help get their message out there and get them in front of the right people and on the right stages there.
Oh, well, yes. I mean, you have so many different clients. I mean, is it people who've just written books, or what kind of?
That's one of the things that we just say inspiring thought leaders. So it could be people that have written books. It could be speakers. It could be like you, where that is inspiring the songs. Let's get those out there. It could be brands that have a great new product, right? People, I believe that everybody's biggest problem today is obscurity, right? We've got access to billions of people. The product or service or song or album that you currently have, there are thousands or millions of people that would love that. In its current form, they would gladly pay money for that. There's only one problem. They don't know you exist. So, if obscurity is the biggest problem we all have, how can we leverage technology? How can we get introduced to our ideal customers? How can we get heard by them, not just shout louder?
Yeah, something you said, I heard you say was that how did you say, if it's what is ordinary to you is amazing to other people?
That's one of my core beliefs. And I've
say that
seen
right?
that. Yes, what's ordinary to you is amazing to others.
Okay.
So we all underestimate what we know and our life experiences. And we overestimate other people's. And so we think, well, everybody knows this. Everybody doesn't know this. And I always look at it as we're blessed to be a blessing. So if you've learned these lessons, if other people have invested in you to teach you these and to learn these, well, then you should share them with other people. And most people like, well, I've got nothing to offer, right? There was a line that we used to use in the Navy that in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is God. If you're a second grader, a fourth grader in school is just amazing, right? They know everything. They have mastered second grade math. So there's always somebody that we can help. And, it's never been easier today to share what you know. And, be it being a podcast host, a podcast guest, putting up videos, putting up blogs. It's really an amazing time.
Yeah, no, it's really that phrase kind of really inspired me also with this podcast, because it's ordinary to me to read a newspaper article or hear an interview and then write a song about it. It's just something just kind of comes out of me, and it's I've done it, been doing it for years, and I put it out on an album, but so it's kind of ordinary to me. But kind of people have said that it's more amazing to them that we can interview an interview like this, and then I'll write a song about it, and then kind of condense it down. But doing what I ordinarily do, but putting it in this format is just, it's kind of strange. That I'm not doing anything different, but it's just in a different format.
There's one person listening to this that says that's ordinary, and that's you, and everybody else goes, that's amazing.
Well, yeah, but I guess, yeah, it's just writing a song. I've been doing it so many, hundreds and hundreds. So yeah, I'm sure on another planet, somewhere in the universe, there's a place where they all talk in songs. They all you were going to a shop and you order a cafe and you have to write a song about it. So I'm sure that's ordinary there. And then I would be pretty average a very bad songwriter, because I'd have to wait outside the cafe for 10 minutes writing the song before I could go in and order a frappe with cinnamon swirl. So.
As long as they have coffee shops in that alternate universe, I'll go there.
Yeah, I guess there's a parallel universe for all of us, and there'll be one with catered to your taste, Tom. Okay, well, this has been great. So, I mean, I've learned so much just like from using you, and I mean, what else do you think about? Because also with podcasts it's so low barriers to entry. I mean, anyone listening to this, they could you just upload an audio file to Anchor FM, or you could have a podcast tomorrow, and you just have a microphone you can use. So it's amazing, these low barriers to entry. What would you say because I got to write a song about this. Maybe I'll come around to that. What is it about podcasts that people should know?
I think it's really the promise of podcasting, right? The promise of the conversation, the promise of the connection, and that there's a lot of problems in the world today, but there's no better times to be alive, right? So we're talking here, we're connecting on technology that didn't exist 20 years ago. And 10 years ago, neither one of us could have afforded it. Mm-hmm. And now it's largely free. And that you can meet new people, talk to new people, get new ideas, expand your world wherever you are. I'm in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Most people are like, does it really exist? Yes, it does. But I can talk with people. I can listen to people, get new ideas throughout just by listening to podcasts. And in the past, that would be I've got to go to a library and read a book that's old and that's factual, as opposed to just listening in on a conversation. And to me, that's, conversations of what have changed my life. Introductions have changed my life. Podcasts have changed my life.
Gosh, yeah, you're the living, breathing Mr. Podcast now. And you go to all these podcast conferences as well? Before pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID, I went to them. Even now, we've got them online.
Podcasts and conferences about podcasting.
Exactly. There's something for everyone. And the diversity there is just so amazing too. So there's a common love or common interest in podcasting, but you've got people coming at it through so many different areas. And that diversity bringing all it together. And so you learn from different people, you interact with them. And it's like no other conference that I've been to. Maybe musicians would be the same thing, where you've got somebody coming from, country and Western, you've got somebody coming from rock, all the rest of that. And they come together for the love of whatever it is, an instrument, a guitar. Just there's a lot of people that play guitars differently. Right. But they all have that same love of it, that same desire, that same burning passion. And so I think that's what it is. And it's great to see there's some people that have been in it, the old timers. And in this industry, old timer means I've been in it 16 years. Right. And there's new people that are just discovering it. But we all have that same passion to share from each other.
Well, I think if you go through a podcast conference, you're going to get a better class of conversation. If you go to a musicians conference, there, it's not a specialty. I'm pulling it. I'm one of the better ones, and I'm still terrible. So we're not used to stringing two words together without sitting down with a pen and paper for 20 minutes to try and put a lyric. If you listen to the lyrics on the radio, you can tell the paucity of songwriters' conversations, I'm afraid.
And with that too, it's just the medium is just growing there, right? So we're getting better, more people are learning about it. And I still think there's sort of that underdog mentality, right? Yeah. That we're all in this together. It's not saturated yet. And you've got big people like didn't Michelle Obama or launch a podcast the other week, and so she did. Names are coming in, it's like big names are coming in, and that's great because they bring other people to it. I guarantee you, when she announced that, there were millions of people going, "Great! I can't wait to watch her podcast." What's a podcast? So she's bringing people into it. And I remember years ago at a podcasting conference, it was a gentleman by the name of Cliff Ravenscraft. At that time, he went by the Podcast Answer Man. He was one of the early people in podcasting. And he pointed out that in podcasting, there's no competition. We're all in this together. It's not like we're fighting for ad dollars. It's not like we're television or radio where it's saturated. He's like, right now, our enemies are the ones that don't even know we exist, that don't know that podcasting exists. And he's like, in 20 years, if we get as saturated as radio and television, all right, maybe then we turn the guns on each other. But he said, right now, we're all in this together, trying to go out there and evangelize for this great new medium.
Gosh, well, that's such a positive note. I'm feeling inspired. You've made me. I was already loving podcasts, but I think your enthusiasm is infectious.
Well, and if anybody is listening to this, you know the power of a podcast, right? Podcasting is pretty much binary. It's either I don't listen to podcasts, or I listen and I love podcasts. And I think it has to do how you learn too. But you understand, if you understand podcasts, the power it can have, the connection it has. When you see Jack in real life, right after the world opens up again, you would walk up to Jack, give him a great big hug like your old friends, and he'd be looking at you going, who is this person? Is this a stalker? No, this is just a person that listens to you week after week. They look forward to hearing from you. And there's just that connection. And I know of no other medium that kind of bond is created.
Yeah,
television, it's all right, well, you're a personality. Radio, you've got your radio voice on, and it's between commercials. But it's amazing with podcasters, and you see this at the podcast conference, where somebody comes up and they're your best friend. They know about that your wife or your girlfriend doesn't listen to podcasts. They know that what you drink at the coffee shop, all the rest of this. They know all these little things, and then they come and meet you, and you're like, have we met before? And in their mind, you're old friends, because they look forward to spending time with you every week.
Yeah, and also having a conversation with someone for an hour is a real between guest and host is also, you really have to be on your game. No, you really have to be best friends in like an hour. So, yeah,
and
you're both working for the common good. Nobody wants to have dead air, or run. I don't want to run out of questions. You don't want to run out of answers. We're both working towards the same goal. No,
and out of respect for your podcast, I don't want to go on a tangent here, but I wanted to tell a story. And this one is really about the power of podcasting. So a couple of years ago in Kalamazoo, we had a very, very tragic event. A very, very sick person came and overnight shot, well, I think it was 10 people. And it happened on a Saturday night. On Sunday morning, I got up and looked at my phone, and I had these texts and messages from all these people, praying for you and your family, thinking for you, all the rest of this. And as I was going through it, they were all friends from podcasting, podcast hosts that I'd been on their show. They knew I was from Kalamazoo, Michigan. And I was a little bit just I had no idea what this was about. And so it's a Sunday morning. I walk downstairs, and my bride is watching television. And on the news is this madman that shot all these people. And it struck me, Jack, that it wasn't until the afternoon that family and friends started to reach out and, say, is everything okay? How's everything in the community? But it was friends that I'd met through podcasting, people that I'd never seen them in real life. We'd never shared a beer or a cup of coffee. We've never shook hands or given each other hugs. They thought enough about me, and they knew that I was from Kalamazoo, that they reached out. And to me, it was like, wow, this does make the world a smaller place. This is the promise of podcasting.
Gosh, that's a beautiful story. Yeah. Well, I'm in the south of Italy, everyone. So if anything happens, we've got a lot of active volcanoes. Yeah, brilliant. Well, that's a wonderful note to end on, Tom. I don't think we can top that, unless you've got anything else you'd like to add.
Well, let's just circle back to what you said earlier. What's ordinary to you is amazing to others. If you're listening to this, there's something that some experience that you've had, some insight that you look at and say, it's ordinary. It's not. It's a blessing and something that you could bless other people with. So I just encourage you, share that with the world.
And if you want to share it with the world, you can go to interviewvalet.com, contact Tom directly, and he'll fix you up with podcasts that want to talk to you.
Thank you, Jack.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Have a great day.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye. The radio inside my head is dull. The presenters hold the same boring opinions. The programming's repetitive, the ideas never new. If only there was something I could do. My thoughts were all the same until you pollinate my brain. After a podcast I have new and shiny thoughts. Podcasts have given me my education. I've learned the most amazing tips and tricks. Adopted happy habits, stop what held me back. Turned my life around, got back on track. My thoughts were all the same, but now you pollinate my brain. After a podcast I have new and shiny thoughts. Clears my head and trains my body. I wanna lift the veil of materialism. Try to be a bit more vegan. Act upon my thinking and look forward to the life comes after death. My thoughts were all the same, but now you pollinate my brain. After a podcast I have new and shiny thoughts. After a podcast I have new and shiny thoughts. After a podcast I have new and shiny thoughts. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review it on your podcast app, or search out the song on any of the major music services. Or you can download directly from Podsongs.com. Buying the song directly is the best way you can help us financially. Thanks to Maurizio Sarnicola and Massimino Vodza for working with me on the music, and Dori Verba, my researcher. And thanks to you, the listener. See you next time.